It's interesting to see how kids fit into their mold, so to speak, where previously in infancy, all their needs were roughly the same. So as you grew up, you began to notice certain physical features or traits about yourself that were performing differently than others, that attracted or acquired more attention. These physical characteristics that we have been blessed with, be it gifts or curses, are what made us feel unique or special at such a young age. However, being special also meant we had to rapidly assimilate our unique traits so that they matched with our dynamic lifestyles and our behaviors. And we couldn't ignore that without these special traits of ours, we probably wouldn't be the same people we are today. So without further ado, I think it's time to get into this week's High Fives. 5. Small bladder. So remember when I said that we had certain characteristics that made us special or unique? My small bladder was a characteristic that indeed made me feel special. You can probably see where this is going, but to put it bluntly, I was a bedwetter. As a kid, I always took precautions to always go to the bathroom and not drink a lot of water before bed. Yet, I somehow failed. I remember waking my parents up in the middle of the night. It happened again. My parents would then put me back to sleep, but then put me on the other side of the bed that wasn't wet. But I think I wet the bed so often that my parents just should have bought me yellow sheets. Now this is all fine and comfortable with my family, but sleepovers, that was a different story. I was always super self-conscious when it was the time to go to sleep, that I hardly slept at all. I took my usual precautions. I brought an extra change of clothes and extra plastic bags, and I made sure that I had everything I needed. No borrowing clothes or sleeping bags, because honestly, I don't think you'd want those back anyway. And yet, it never failed. I peed my pants. It was really pissing me off. When I'd wake up, I tried my best to conceal the evidence by changing as quickly as possible. But I couldn't avoid the glaring stains or pee puddles on the sofa and carpet. But luckily, I always had an alibi. I always made sure to choose my sleepovers carefully. Not friends, not houses, but if they had pets. So when I'd have my accidents, I would always blame it on the dog. I think my friend's dog would have hated me each time he saw me. And he'd be like, "Ruh-roh, there he goes, off to claim the sofa again." 4. Lactose intolerance. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is the perfect segue from having a small bladder. No guys, I didn't have poo-poo accidents at my friend's house, sometimes, but I learned very early that there were certain things that I just couldn't eat. For me, my lactose intolerance was very selective and quite random. I knew I couldn't straight up drink milk, but I knew I could get away with the other dairy products. However, there was actually no way to know unless I actually tried something. So unfortunately, I learned from experience. You know those school lunches you never trust? Well, one day it was mac and cheese day. But usually I can eat the school mac and cheese. But one day in particular, it tasted exceptionally different. But I kept eating it anyway. Later that day, I also had a soccer game. And then that's when I felt that something was wrong. My stomach was rumbling and I was feeling rather bloated. Luckily enough for me, I actually survived the whole game. Except on the way home. So on the way home, I slipped out a quiet fart. Now at this point, this is where you probably can't trust a fart. It's either going to be a solid, liquid, or gas, or a combination of the three. But this fart was not the gassy type. So as we stopped at a gas station, I calmly and slowly went out of the car and went to the bathroom to assess the damage. I'll spare you guys on the graphic details, but in short, I had to throw my underwear away. And what made matters worse is that I was wearing my white soccer jersey and white soccer shorts. It was a perfect canvas. But the good news is that I was wearing my sweater, so I just removed my sweater and tied it around my waist so that it was blocking my butt. So I'm glad I left the restroom with some shred of dignity. 3. Large tonsils. On the surface, this physical characteristic wasn't something that was obvious to me right away. It was only until I ate certain things or did certain activities that I started to notice that something was a little bit different. When I'd play sports, I'd be breathing more heavily, and then I'd start to like gag once you get that very dry throat feeling. When I ate thick foods such as like cake, desserts, peanut butter, bananas, I'd choke. Eventually I grew to accept that I couldn't really enjoy these things as much as everyone else. So I decided to avoid them. But the thing is, people didn't really understand why a kid like me didn't enjoy certain activities or these certain foods that otherwise a normal kid would have loved. So when I was a toddler, about 4 to 5 years old, I had the worst experience in daycare. It was one of the cook's birthdays, and he decided to make something special for all of us. What he decided to make was this green, fluffy, like chocolate pudding that had like bananas and whipped cream and chocolate syrup. Every kid's dream, right? The teachers then told us that we could play after we had finished our nice treat. But knowing me, because I didn't like these sweet things, I just automatically threw away my dessert, but not without the teachers noticing me. The teachers became mad at me. They said I was being wasteful and that I was being rude and disrespectful to the cook on his birthday. So what they did was they got another pudding cup from the kitchen, they sat me down, and decided to force feed me until I finished everything. I remember I was crying and they were saying things like, if you're not gonna eat this by yourself, then I'm just gonna have to feed you like a baby. Ooh, it's creepy, it's like I can hear her in my head. So, even now that I've had my tonsils removed since then, I still can't really enjoy peanut butter or cake or chocolate the same way ever since that traumatic experience. Dos. Height challenged. I was one of the only Asian kids in my community, and that automatically made me the shortest. Height was such a hot topic of contention in school. You'd always see kids trying to size each other up by standing back to back and then measuring each other to see who was the tallest. Most kids in school are always comparing how fast they are or how strong they are, because in the end that's all we really cared about. For the time being, if you were a tall kid in grade school, I would say your life was pretty awesome. Oh, but don't get me wrong, I enjoyed school as much as the next guy. It's just that there were certain things about my height that I didn't enjoy. Apparently, people like to bring attention to how small you are, just as much as they like to praise the tall people. I just don't understand why this was such a big thing for some people. Like, I'm not small, you're just big. And yes, small people, I can totally vouch. You got the armrest, being underestimated, being stepped on, and heck, even being called short is enough to just set you off. But what bugged me the most was when height was seen as a reason. Aside from not enjoying yourself at theme parks, at my school, height was seen as a measuring stick for academic competency. Little unknown fact about me was that I was a bad Asian kid growing up. Like, I didn't do bad things per se, I just got bad grades. My grades were really bad to the point where I actually had to repeat second grade. My peers didn't really understand the reasons why I was held back, but that didn't stop them from crafting explanations of their own. Like, it became the popular opinion that I was held back from third grade because I was too short. Like, I don't blame anyone for thinking this way, I just find it kind of funny how nonsensical it was looking back. I mean, if we apply the same logic today, then Shaquille O'Neal must have been a frickin' genius that got his PhD. Uno! Growth hormone deficiency. So this one is like a sequel to number 4. There was actually a biological reason for me being so short. It's just that I didn't really figure it out until I was in 6th grade. At first, people thought it was just a natural thing for me to be small. I mean, it is a natural thing for guys to not grow as fast as girls and everything. But then my family decided that it was time to look into things. So one day, my family brought me to the hospital to get some x-rays. And it so happened that my 11-year-old body had the bone age of a 7-year-old. It was like I was some special case of Benjamin Button, or I was an elf. The doctor said that if no action were to be taken for my stunted growth, then I would be dwarfed, and that my height would actually be below average even after puberty. To be 7 years old for more than a year was something I didn't really want. Once I was 7 years old, twice I was 7 years old, thrice I was 7 years old. My mama told me that I had growth hormone deficiency. Of course, I didn't want that. No one would. So the doctors then suggested a procedure that would actually make me taller. I was willing to try anything. However, I did not exactly like the suggestion. The procedure they suggested was for me to take growth hormones every day until my growth plates closed, at which point I would have been done growing naturally. Now, this all looks good on paper, but no pain, no gain. I ended up receiving shots in my legs every day for 7 years. I received my last shot when I was out of high school. Through the process and through the years, I realized that being a short Asian kid was actually better than being a short Asian kid with growth hormone deficiency. I'd pick short Asian kid any day. So I'm incredibly thankful and grateful for these unique physical characteristics in my life, and without them, I wouldn't be me. Even if the curses do outweigh the gifts, we seem to take the life experiences from our physical characteristics for granted. So don't ignore that being different is actually a beautiful thing. So be respectful and sensitive, because that other person might be more different than they seem. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for this week's High Fives. Thanks for sticking with me to the end if you guys are still here. I know this week was a little bit of a heavier week based on the topics that we covered. And for me, it was definitely a more challenging and definitely a more super vulnerable week. I revealed so much about myself to you guys. But what I'm going to do is next week, we're going to tackle another physical characteristic that we didn't cover this week, so that we have a little bit more time and a little bit more depth to cover in just that topic, instead of having a huge episode with all these things. So I think that's what we'll look forward to for next week. So thanks for joining me on this week's High Fives.